All right, broadcasting back from the underground bunker in an undisclosed location once again for Quarantine Church. So this is our first session for this week. We're going to talk about resurrections all week. I'm going to spend a little bit of time in the Old Testament talking about prophecies about resurrection. And basically the idea of the resurrection of the dead coming back to life is mentioned in the Old Testament, but it's a little subtle. It's not super overt. So it's kind of one of those things you got to look for it. Same thing with talk about afterlife, heaven and hell. It's there. It's in the Old Testament, but it's not one of the main things that they talk about in the Old Testament. Not nearly as mentioned as much as they do in the New Testament. So in fact, it was so there was a division over it. It was so unclear that there's two groups of Jewish leaders in Jesus' day, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they were split over the idea of if the resurrection was even something that would happen. Right? The Pharisees were a lot more conservative, and they believed that the resurrection was going to happen, the resurrection of the dead, and the Sadducees actually did not believe that the resurrection was going to happen. They were more liberal. Anyway, we're going to look at some of these Old Testament passages. For today, we're going to look at Psalm 49. So Psalm 49, an Old Testament passage that talks about the fate of the dead. So turn there if you will. Psalm 49. All right, Psalm 49. Here we go. It starts off with a kind of a long introduction. It doesn't really get rolling until around verse 5 or 6. But here we go. Hear this, all you people. Listen to all who live in this world. Both low and high, rich and poor alike. My mouth will speak words of wisdom. The utterance of my heart will give understanding. I will turn my ear to a proverb. With a harp I will expound my riddle. And then here we go. Why should I fear when evil days come, when wicked deceivers surround me, those who trust in their wealth and boast in their great riches? No man can redeem the life of another or give God a ransom for him. The ransom for a life is too costly. No payment is ever enough, that he should live on forever and not see decay. For all can see that the wise men die. The foolish and the senseless alike perish and leave their wealth to others. Their tombs will remain their houses forever, their dwellings for endless generations, though they had named lands after them. But man, despite his riches, does not endure. He is like the beasts that perish, and this is the fate of those who trust in themselves. That's a key phrase there, those who trust in themselves, and their followers who approve their sayings. Like sheep, they are destined for the grave, and death will feed on them. The upright, though, will rule over them in the morning. Their forms will decay in the grave, far from their princely mansions. But God will redeem my life from the grave. He will surely take me to himself. There's a reference to the resurrection right there. Verse 16, do not be overawed when a man grows rich, when the splendor of his house increases, for he will take nothing with him when he dies. His splendor will not descend with him. Though he lived and he counted himself blessed, and men praise you when you prosper, he will join the generation of his fathers, who will never see the light of life. A man who has riches without understanding is like the beasts that perish. And that's Psalm 49. Okay, so there's quite a bit going on in this psalm. Like I said, the first 4 verses or so are just kind of an introduction, like listen up, I'm about to drop some wisdom on you. And then he compares the wicked, where you can see what I'm doing, the wicked, and he also talks about them being rich. We'll talk about that in a second, and then he'll talk about the righteous, but I'm going to give them less room because he talks about them less. Okay. All right, there you go. The wicked and the righteous. Okay, so the assumption here, when he talks about the wicked is and the rich, he kind of puts them together. It's basically that they're trusting in their riches. Okay, that they're not trusting in God; they're trusting in their riches. Okay, so the Bible doesn't teach that having money is a sin or wicked, but the Bible teaches trusting in your money is foolish and wicked. Okay, so that's what he's getting at here, okay? And so a lot of references here, though, to the afterlife, which, again, is kind of a subtle thing in the Old Testament. It's not super well explained in the Old Testament, or at least developed that concept. It's more clearly explained in the New Testament what happens when people die. But here's one of those places where it's mentioned. So anyway, starting around verse 5, we start to see some things. And one of the things it says about the righteous is that they do not need to fear the wicked. Okay? The righteous do not need to fear the wicked, it says in verse 5. Okay, I'll put the verse number there. Okay? So even though they're surrounding me, why should I fear? Okay, you don't need to fear when these evil days come. Why? Okay, and for verse 6 is going to start to explain. Those who trust in their riches, first of all, no one can save their friends from death. Right? Because he talks about how those who boast that no one can redeem the life of another, the cost is too high, that he should live forever. You can't buy salvation. All right, in the book of Acts, we see that man who's trying to buy the Holy Spirit. Basically, Simon the sorcerer. His idea is that he can, do some cool magic stuff with the power of the Holy Spirit, and he's rebuked because you cannot buy salvation. You can't buy God. So that's verses 6 through 9. You can't save your friends from death, and you can't buy salvation. Okay, and then around verse 10 is you can't save yourself. You can't save yourself, right? Verse 10 says that all men are going to die. The fool, the senseless, and they're going to leave their wealth to others, okay? So one of the themes that we see over and over again is that you can't take it with you. You can't take your wealth with you. All right, that's all throughout this psalm, right? You cannot take your wealth with you. You're going to leave it to others, even if you had lands named after you. Other generations are going to live there. Nothing that we have that endure. The riches do not endure, okay? So if that's what we're living for, if we're just living for getting more stuff, then we are living for the wrong things, okay? Now, the next verses here, verses 11 through 12, says that it can't secure happiness. Riches cannot secure happiness on earth. Now, you may argue with that. You may say, man, if I had a whole bunch of money, I sure would be happy in this life. But you say you cannot, okay, secure happiness on this earth. It's nothing that's going to endure, okay? All it takes is a couple of downturns. So some of you have seen this over the last few months. A little downturn in the stock market, a few drops in the Dow Industrial Jones, and all of a sudden, all that wealth and all that security and all that happiness is gone. And so it's a very unsteady foundation. If your source of happiness and security is in just money and what you have, that can be taken away in an instant. The New Testament, Jesus talks about not storing up treasures where thieves can break in and steal, or where moths can destroy, or rust can corrupt, So then down in verses 13 and 14, actually, verse 13 is a key verse. It says, this is the fate of those who trust in themselves. Okay, so this is, I think, kind of a key verse, verse 13. They trust in themselves, okay, and their followers who do the same. Okay, so that is a key phrase. Okay, we talk about the wicked here, and like I said, a lot of the discussion is about the rich, but really, it's not so much that they have money, it's that they're trusting in themselves. They're trusting in their riches. Okay, so that's a key verse. And then verse 14, one more thing about the wicked. It says that can't secure happiness. Money can't secure happiness in the next life. There is a next life, all right, for believers and unbelievers. That's referenced here. That is here when it talks about the grave. It says that they go to the grave, or Sheol, okay, in the Hebrew. and that the death will feed on them, and the upright will rule over them. Okay, so now we're starting to see some things about okay. So the righteous will rule over the wicked in the future, okay? In the next life, okay? It will rule over them. Their forms will decay. They'll be far from their princely mansions. Again, you can't take it with you, okay? And then now we're going to start to see some more things about the righteous. Okay, verse 15. Let me move the camera to see better. Okay, verse 15 says that the righteous do not need to fear death. We see that repeated. You don't need to fear the wicked, and you don't need to fear death. The righteous do not. Okay, verse 15 says, God will redeem my life from the grave. He will surely take me to himself. And then the word Selah appears there, okay? Every time you see that, that means pause. Think about it, okay? Selah. Pause and think about what that was just said. This is one of those key Old Testament references that talks about the afterlife, that God will redeem my life from the grave. The word life there is the same as the Hebrew word soul. He will take my soul from the grave and take me to himself, okay? So no matter how much money you have, you cannot buy your way into heaven. It's all about trusting in God, okay? Now verses 16 through 20. I kind of wrap things up where it talks about there's no need to fear the wicked again. The righteous do not need to fear the wicked, right? He says, don't be overawed. Don't be blown away. Oh, man, look how beautiful their stuff is. Look how much money they have. Look how great their houses are. Because he's not going to take nothing with him when he dies. And his splendor will not descend with him. So that is living for today. And today is a very short time, okay? We would rather live for eternity. The righteous keep their eyes focused on eternity, okay? And people may call him blessed, but he will join the generations of his father, so other wicked people before him, and they will never see the light of life. That's it for them, okay? They go on, again, as a reference to that the place where they go is not a place of life, okay? It's a reference to Hades, okay? And then a man who has riches without understanding is like the beasts that perish, okay? So there's a setup here, the destiny for the wicked and the destiny for the righteous. The wicked, they will not see the light of life. Their money cannot secure happiness. They can't take their wealth with them. For the righteous, they don't need to fear. They can live in peace. There's no fear of death because God will take us and take care of our lives. So that's our thought for today as we think about these Old Testament passages that talk about the afterlife. We'll do some more tomorrow. See you then.